The conference hall buzzed with the sounds of wealthy investors, politicians, and business moguls. The air was thick with self-assuredness and wealth, designer suits, sparkling jewelry, and the chatter of people who thought they could control the world. Elon Musk stood at the front of the room, confidently mingling with the elite. He was in his element, comfortable and untouchable. He adjusted his suit jacket and offered a sharp smile to the group of tech giants gathered around him. As always, the conversation was about space, Tesla, and the next big thing. But then, the door to the conference room opened and a man walked in, Ibrahim Traore. At first glance, he didn't seem to fit in. Ibrahim was wearing a simple, well-tailored shirt, and his pants, though crisp, didn't carry the designer labels everyone else wore. His shoes were sturdy and practical, the kind that had seen better days. But the way he walked into the room, calm and collected, with a sense of purpose that radiated from him, was striking. Elon's eyes narrowed slightly. Who was this person? How had he gotten an invite to an event for the world's most influential people? He wasn't dressed like them. He didn't talk like them. To Elon, he seemed out of place, and that was something he couldn't ignore. "What's this?" Elon said to the group next to him, a sarcastic smile spreading across his face. He nodded toward Ibrahim, who was walking confidently through the room, his gaze focused ahead. "Who's the new guy? Another one of these, let's change the world types?" Elon's voice was loud enough for those around him to hear, the mockery clear in his tone. The group around him chuckled, nodding in agreement. But Elon didn't stop there. "Seriously, what does a guy like that even do here?" he added louder now. "Is he a businessman? An entrepreneur? No way. He's just some poor guy who thinks he can rub shoulders with us." Ibrahim, who had just entered the room, caught the tail end of Elon's words. He wasn't fazed, but the tension in the air seemed to shift. People glanced at him, some nervously, others pretending they hadn't heard the comment. Elon noticed Ibrahim's calm demeanor and took it as a sign of weakness. He walked up to him, his voice dripping with sarcasm, as he reached out to shake Ibrahim's hand. "So, what's your story?" Elon asked with a smirk. "You're not here to pitch some new startup, are you? No Tesla-like genius hiding under that shirt?" Ibrahim looked at Elon, unfazed by the mockery in his voice. His handshake was firm, not weak, not eager to impress, just steady. "I'm Ibrahim," he said, his tone calm and even, "and I'm here to speak about something that concerns us all." "Oh, really?" Elon chuckled, glancing around at the other guests. "What could a guy like you possibly have to say that concerns the likes of us?" Ibrahim didn't flinch. He looked Elon in the eye. "I'm here to talk about the future of humanity, about the things you don't see when you're too busy counting your billions." The words hung in the air. The room grew a little quieter as those around Elon waited for him to respond. His smile faltered, and for the briefest moment, his confidence wavered. "Future of humanity?" Elon scoffed. "Come on. Do you even know what you're talking about? Maybe you should stick to your charity work, or whatever it is you do. This is a room for real leaders." Ibrahim stood his ground, his voice quiet but filled with strength. "Real leaders don't mock people. They listen. They help. You'll see." Elon raised an eyebrow. "Oh, I'm listening, but I don't think you have anything worth hearing." He turned to the group, signaling that the conversation was over. "Like, a lot of people think they can change the world, but in reality, they don't even know how to get into the game." Ibrahim didn't back down. He knew what he had come here for, and he wasn't going to let someone like Elon Musk shake his resolve. The crowd around them began to disperse, but Ibrahim caught the attention of a few key figures who had overheard the exchange. They weren't quite sure what to make of the situation, but they couldn't ignore the quiet power in Ibrahim's words. Elon, still chuckling, turned to his companion and muttered, "This is a joke. I'm sure he'll be gone in 5 minutes. Just wait and see." But what Elon didn't realize was that Ibrahim wasn't going anywhere. The quiet confidence in his eyes told a different story. Ibrahim wasn't just another wannabe. He was here to make a real change. And before the night was over, Elon would find out exactly who Ibrahim Traore was. As the evening continued, the spotlight shifted back to Elon Musk, who was reveling in the attention of the crowd. But a new wave of tension had entered the room. There were still a few murmurs from the people nearby, not about Ibrahim's clothes or his quiet demeanor anymore, but about his response to Elon. Whispers spread across the room, but no one dared challenge Elon directly. They all knew the power he wielded, but a sense of uncertainty began to rise. Ibrahim, though, remained the picture of composure. He wasn't here for a confrontation. He wasn't here to argue with Elon or prove a point to anyone in the room. His goal was simple: to understand, to observe, and to learn from those who had created real-world change. But he had no intention of remaining silent in the face of mockery. He walked to the far end of the room, his quiet presence still not unnoticed. His eyes scanned the walls adorned with achievements, and his thoughts wandered. Just then, a group of influential businessmen, including the local mayor, entered the room, immediately drawing the attention of everyone. The group casually walked toward the bar, and without even thinking about it, Ibrahim stepped in their direction, looking for a quieter space to sit. Just as he approached, Elon Musk spotted him from across the room. His earlier remarks hadn't been enough for him. There was something about Ibrahim that had been nagging at him all night, something that Elon felt compelled to address. With a sudden change of pace, Elon walked toward Ibrahim. "You know," Elon started again, louder this time, his voice dripping with mockery. "I never expected to see someone like you here. Must be some kind of mistake." He waved a hand toward Ibrahim's outfit, his eyes glinting with arrogance. "But hey, at least you're not in the back, sweeping up the mess, right?" Ibrahim didn't flinch. The barbs were starting to feel familiar, like the noise of a storm brewing just on the horizon. Instead of snapping back, Ibrahim quietly turned to face Elon. "Is this how you treat everyone who doesn't fit your idea of success?" he asked, his tone level, his eyes unwavering. The shift in the room was palpable. Several people stopped what they were doing, glancing in Ibrahim's direction. Elon's expression faltered, but only for a second, before he laughed again, this time louder, trying to reassert control. "I'm just trying to understand why you're here. You don't belong in a place like this." This time, however, the crowd seemed less entertained. Some exchanged uncomfortable looks, while others shifted away from the two men. It was becoming clear that there was more to Ibrahim than just his humble appearance. Ibrahim, never one to back down, stepped closer to Elon. "I'm not here to belong," he said softly, but it carried a weight that was felt in the pit of everyone's stomach. "I'm here to learn from people who understand the bigger picture, not to be judged by their wallets." Elon's cocky grin began to fade as Ibrahim's words sunk in. His demeanor remained calm, yet powerful. This wasn't just another self-made man trying to stand his ground. This was different. It was something more. The silence hung between them for a long moment. Then, just as it seemed that Elon might respond with another insult, a familiar voice echoed through the room. A businessman, well known for his wealth and influence in the area, turned to address the situation, his voice cutting through the tension. "Is there a problem here, Elon?" The businessman's words were casual but firm. People began to gather around, drawn by the tension between the two men. It wasn't the mayor, but someone even more important. Someone whose reputation held more weight than Elon's own in certain circles. Elon's face turned slightly pale. He quickly composed himself, the fake smile creeping back into place. But the damage had already been done. The attention had shifted, and people were starting to take note of Ibrahim, who, in their eyes, was no longer just an out-of-place individual, but someone with the presence of mind to stand up to a figure like Elon Musk. And that was when the room began to notice. The quiet man in worn clothes was not the one who didn't belong. In fact, he was the one who had been underestimated. The room seemed to freeze in time. Elon, usually the center of attention, was now the one left to explain himself. His grin faltered as whispers passed through the crowd. People were starting to gather around, some standing a little taller in respect for Ibrahim's steady composure. The businessman who had spoken earlier, a man known as Richard, stood with a calm authority that only seemed to make the room quieter. The once vibrant chatter of the elite had quieted down, replaced by murmurs of intrigue and curiosity. Ibrahim glanced around the room, his eyes taking in the surprised faces. He knew that change was coming, and it was coming fast. There was no turning back now. Richard, who had spoken up, stood with his arms crossed, watching Elon with a skeptical gaze. "Elon," he started, his voice carrying weight, "I think we've all gotten to know each other here. But I don't think I've ever seen you quite like this." Elon tried to recover quickly, straightening his posture and forcing a smile. "What's the issue, Richard?" Elon said, but his voice lacked the usual force. "This guy," he motioned toward Ibrahim, "has no business being here." Richard raised an eyebrow, slowly shaking his head. "That's an interesting perspective, considering I know who this man is." The room went quiet. The statement hit harder than any of Elon's quips. People turned their heads, their eyes now focused on Ibrahim, who remained as calm as ever. Elon, too, froze, his expression shifting from disbelief to confusion. Richard didn't seem to care about Elon's reaction. Instead, he walked toward Ibrahim with a respectful nod. "Mr. Traore," Richard said, It's an honor to have you here. I wasn't expecting you at this gathering, but I'm glad you joined us. The words fell like stones, and the room's atmosphere shifted instantly. Everyone's eyes widened. A hushed silence filled the space. Richard, noticing the shift in the room, turned toward the gathered guests and addressed them all. You see, not only is Mr. Ibrahim Traoré the president of Burkina Faso, but he's also a man of profound influence and integrity. And he's one of the reasons that our company is thriving. The shock rippled through the crowd. Elon's face turned ashen, and for the first time, his arrogance was replaced by a visible discomfort. People started whispering in hushed tones, their expressions changing from amusement to astonishment. Ibrahim, who had remained calm throughout, finally spoke up, his voice carrying with the gravity of his words. Elon, he said softly, but everyone in the room could hear him clearly. You seem to have forgotten one thing. True value isn't in the clothes we wear or the titles we hold. It's in what we do for others. Elon's smirk had faded entirely, replaced with a mixture of confusion and a tinge of embarrassment. The tables had turned, and now he was the one who didn't belong in the conversation. People who had been nodding along with his earlier jabs at Ibrahim now seemed to take pause, reevaluating their assumptions about both men. Ibrahim continued, his voice measured but filled with quiet authority. We've all made assumptions about who belongs where, based on our own limited views. But I'm here to remind you that worth is something we build, through action, through leadership, through respect. The room was still. The uncomfortable tension from before had evaporated, replaced by a collective shift in perspective. A few guests who had been smugly looking down at Ibrahim now looked at him with new eyes. Elon, meanwhile, stood at the center of it all. His once unshakable confidence now rattled, his grip on the conversation slipping further away. Ibrahim smiled, but it wasn't a smile of triumph. It was one of quiet resolve. He wasn't here to fight with Elon. He wasn't here to prove anything. But he had, without a doubt, made his point. The message had been heard loud and clear. Now, Elon, Ibrahim said softly, perhaps you should take a moment to think about who we all are and what we bring to the table. You may not have expected me to be here today, but this is the world we live in. One where all kinds of people, no matter where they come from, have the power to change it. There was a long pause. Elon didn't respond, his head down and his face flushed with embarrassment. His bravado had crumbled under the weight of Ibrahim's calm dignity, and the crowd, once in awe of Elon's confidence, now saw the truth. It was not in arrogance or wealth that true strength lay, but in quiet leadership and humility. The room's mood had shifted completely. No one seemed interested in the wealth or status they once clung to so desperately. They were more interested in Ibrahim's message, in his quiet strength. In that moment, they realized that the man standing before them, humble, composed, and unflinching, was the true embodiment of power and grace. As the evening drew to a close, the guests slowly gathered their things, casting one last look at Ibrahim. But the biggest change wasn't visible. It wasn't in the faces or the words exchanged. It was in the hearts of the people there, who left that night with a new perspective, a lesson in humility and leadership that would stay with them far longer than any expensive suit or polished title. Ibrahim's calm had turned the tide, and Elon, for the first time, found himself not as the center of attention, but as just another man among many. The evening had ended, but the impact lingered in the air like an echo. As guests filtered out of the room, many glanced back at Ibrahim, still seated with the same calm confidence, his demeanor as unshaken as when he first walked in. The whispers had not ceased. In fact, they were louder than ever, but now they were not mocking or dismissive. They were filled with reverence and awe. Elon, however, remained frozen at the center of the room. He had not anticipated this. His usual tactics, arrogance, dismissiveness, and mocking superiority, had been met not with the usual sycophantic responses, but with a quiet and firm resistance. People who had once admired his bravado were now looking at him with quiet judgment, and it was not the kind of attention he was used to. Richard, the businessman who had first spoken up, now approached Ibrahim, a look of respect on his face. Mr. Traoré, Richard said, I have to say that was a masterstroke. I've never seen someone handle a situation like that with such poise. Ibrahim smiled politely, his eyes glinting with a quiet understanding. It's not about winning a fight, he replied calmly. It's about making sure that the right message is heard. And today, I think that message has been delivered. Richard nodded, clearly impressed by Ibrahim's humility. I couldn't agree more. I've seen a lot of business deals, and I've worked with some powerful people, but you You're something else. Ibrahim's gaze shifted to the door where Elon stood, still processing the events. His confidence had all but shattered, and he looked every bit the fool he had tried to paint others as. Elon, he's not a bad man, Ibrahim said softly, his tone gentle but resolute. He's just forgotten that true strength lies not in the ability to belittle others, but in the courage to elevate them. Richard looked at him with admiration. You've got a rare gift, Ibrahim. A gift to turn things around without making anyone feel lesser for it. Ibrahim's eyes softened. It's not about making others feel small. It's about recognizing our shared humanity, no matter our station in life. But as he spoke, the noise in the room had begun to subside. The remaining guests had gathered in hushed circles, discussing not the extravagant dinner or the polished floors of the luxury venue, but Ibrahim's words. It was clear now that something had shifted. The respect wasn't just for the president of Burkina Faso. It was for the man who had shown that strength could be wielded quietly, humbly, and powerfully. As the evening wore on, Elon finally snapped out of his reverie. His face was flushed with a mixture of embarrassment and rage. He made a move toward the exit, but paused when he heard Richard call out to him. Leaving so soon, Elon? Richard's voice was polite, but carried an edge. It's just that I thought you might want to address the people you mocked before you go. You know, offer some humility. A little apology, perhaps? Elon's jaw tightened. He glanced at Richard, then at Ibrahim, who stood calmly, unbothered by Elon's seething glare. His composure only made Elon more aware of how foolish he had looked. The silence between them hung heavy, and Elon, still proud, gave a curt nod. I'll leave it to you, Richard, Elon said, his voice now low, almost a mutter. You've got this. As he made his way to the door, he paused once more, casting one last look at Ibrahim. There was no arrogance left in his eyes, only the realization that sometimes people like Ibrahim Traoré could teach a lesson without even trying. I'll never forget this, Elon muttered under his breath, but his words were more directed at himself than anyone else. Richard smiled wryly, watching him leave. No one ever does, Elon. No one ever does. Ibrahim stood there, quietly watching as the last of the guests filed out. He turned to Richard, offering a nod of appreciation. It's over now, he said softly. And I believe it was a lesson for everyone in that room. Richard chuckled lightly. I think we all learned something important tonight. Thank you, Ibrahim. Not just for showing up, but for showing us how it's done. Ibrahim smiled, his gaze sweeping the now empty room. We all have our moments of humility. Mine just happened to come at the right time. As the last of the staff members began to clear the tables, Ibrahim made his way toward the door. But before he left, he turned to Richard, a thought crossing his mind. One more thing, he said, his voice still calm but filled with a quiet power. This is a message for Elon, and for anyone else who thinks like him. Richard raised an eyebrow. And what's that? True leaders don't build walls to keep others out, Ibrahim replied, a smile curling at the corners of his mouth. They break them down, and when they do, everyone rises together. And with that, he walked out into the cool night, leaving the rest of the world to catch up.